Last question. Mike, tell me what you know. DNA is from parents. Good. Right. DNA. I'm going to write down DNA. Right. So you guys already have a good idea about this lesson. Right? I wrote down some words on the whiteboard of what you said, keywords. Right? Alicia used the word inherit. Inherit means to pass down something to your children, right? And it talked about offspring, talked about DNA, and these are exactly the things that we will talk about today. So you guys already have a good idea about today's lesson. Okay. Today's lesson is based on this NGSS standard. I'll move on. And the enduring understanding for this unit is that life depends on the successful interaction of three things. Your genes, right? Your reproduction, and your environment. Okay? These three things allow us to make sure that we can continue having children, right? And survive as a species. By the end of this lesson, you can explain how inheritance influences the traits of organisms. Let's go over some key words. Right? And these traits can be passed down to offspring. Right? Is the noun of inherit. Right? It is the topic of this lesson. How does inheritance works? By the end of today's lesson, you should know these three learning targets. Right now, you have no idea what this means. Don't worry. Can you make a guess what the father looks like? Ginny. Why do you think they look similar or different?
Get more DNA from their mom. Some get.
All right, very good. Yes, they get some of the traits they get from their mom, some from their dad. Right? So let's begin our lesson by investigating, by studying how traits are passed from parents to offspring. All right, and we're going to do it by studying one plant. Right? The same way the father of genetics did. His name is Gregor Mendel. He's a very famous scientist. When I was around your age, I learned about him, and
right, so we're going to pollinate this water.
I'm going to show you this video of how a gardener can breed plants. All right? If you have a good plant and you want to breed it and make seeds so you can plant it again and again, right? This is how you do it.
Watermelon. Now this is a female flower.
Now this is a female flower.
As
you can see, it's got a
small swelling.
Behind the flower. The male flowers
don't have that.
They just have the
so
stem.
That's where you can see the difference.
So that's where you can see the difference. So there's no swelling down that flower.
So what I need to do is
take the pollen from the male flower
and introduce it to the female
flower. So basically, just get the paint, a little paint. So you can use a cotton bud, whichever you prefer.
Generally,
You don't have to be too gentle. You're trying to pick up as much pollen as you can get. So that's the pollen.
So we're going to introduce that.
Into the
female flower.
Into the female flower. So going into the middle.
If it does take,
it'll change from that size
to this watermelon that we've got here.
Which
you can see
which you can see
is a good size.
is a good size.
Okay.
Right, so
Right, so
Oops. All right.
we're going to pollinate this.
we're going to pollinate this.
So what he did is he cross-pollinated two plants. So here we see two plants. If you want to mix the genes of two different plants, you can take the pollen from one flower of one plant, right, and give it to another flower. Oftentimes, though, many plants will just self-pollinate because those flowers are closer. So even though they're the same plant, the different flowers on that same plant can pollinate the other flowers. And then once it pollinates, it can make fruits and seed. Right? So if you ever grow a tomato plant, you don't need a second tomato plant. You can just grow one tomato plant that will have many, many flowers, and those flowers on the same plant will pollinate each other, and you can grow many tomatoes from that. You don't need a mom plant and a dad plant, right? You don't need that, right? You just need one plant, and the flowers, there's male and female parts. And you can make many fruits from one plant this way. Let's say the word pollinate. Pollinate. Pollinate, okay? And we call this process pollinate because the stuff is called pollen, okay? And then he grew them. And guess what? Guess what happened? Guess what this is? What generation this is called? Guys? Not Formula 2. Did you say Formula 2? That's fine. F2, right? F2. F2. Okay, yeah. We call this the F2 generation. It is the second generation, right? You guys see this question at the bottom, right? So you guys have been thinking about it now. Andrew.
Yes.
Can you tell me the percentage of white flowers in the F1 generation?
0.
0, all right? All right, very good. Chester, can you tell me the percentage of white flowers in the F2 generation? Huh? 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4, right? Very good. It's 1 out of 4, right? As a percentage, we'll say it's 25%. Do you guys know how to say ratios?
Yeah.
How would we say this in a ratio?
1/4.
That's a fraction. What we'll say when we use ratios is a little bit different. We'll say 3 to 1. Right? So the way when we use ratios, we'll use a colon here. We will say there's 3 purple to 1. So here, the way we'll read this is 3 purple to 1 white. That's how we'll say it in English. Right? It's a common misconception. When it's 25%, you would think, oh, it's 4 to 1. It's 3 to 1, okay? Or 1 to 3, right? Okay, so we can see now what's happening here. Did the white flower's genes disappear? No, it didn't disappear. Right? It looked like it disappeared in the F1 generation, but it was just hiding. It was just hiding. Right? So then Mendel had to come up with ideas to explain how this is possible. Right? How can you explain this? How can you explain this result? How can a gene hide and then pop up again later in another generation? Jody, do you know? Can someone help? what do we call this generation? I labeled it F1. Can you say F1, Penny? Okay, Jody, can you say F1? F1, very good. Alright. So this would mean, Jody and Penny, what would this be called then? F2, very good, F2, very good. Okay, good. Okay, well, Mendel discovered that flowers color, right? Flower color follows this pattern of inheritance, of dominant and recessive. So obviously, if you're a curious person, you would want to find out, is this true for other traits, right? So he repeated his experiment for other traits, and he found that tall plants were dominant over recessive plants. He found out that the color of the peas, the green pod, right, the outside, is dominant over the yellow. And the shape of the seed, if it was round or wrinkled, right? Round was dominant over the wrinkle. And so on. So he was able to show that this pattern, right, also occurs for many different types of traits. And also, the ratio of the dominant to recessive traits also, right, was evident in all of the other traits that he experimented for. Okay, so Mendel knew nothing about DNA. We would not discover DNA for a long time. Okay? But luckily, we can use our understanding, our modern understanding of genes, right, to explain what's going on. But back then, Mendel didn't know what genes were. He called these things factors, right? It's like these parents had factors, right, that were passed down to their offspring. Right? So, what controls these traits? Right? We all know what DNA and genes are, right? So if you look in a cell's nucleus, we will find chromosomes. And then if we look in the chromosomes, we'll find DNA wrapped around these chromosomes. And then when we zoom in to the DNA and look at sections of the DNA, we will find sections of DNA that will code for proteins, right? And these sections of DNA are genes. Right? And then these genes will make a protein. What are proteins? What's the Chinese word for protein? Right? When I hear that word, I think of meat that I can eat, right? But honestly, proteins have a lot of functions. It's not just meat. Proteins are responsible for many of our traits. The color of our eyes is a protein, determined by our protein. The color of our hair depends on proteins in our body. Right? How tall you are, right? Whether you can be protected against disease, how your body absorbs nutrients. These are all done with the help of proteins. Right? And it is our genes that carry the code for these proteins. Proteins are just basically really, really long molecules that the body can make. And once it makes these very long molecules, the proteins will fold into a shape, right, that has a structure that can carry out all of these functions that our body needs to survive. Okay. I know we're learning a lot of words today, but we will practice these later, and then tomorrow we'll practice them again, because there's a lot of vocabulary. Yes?
Can you copy your genes?
Can we copy our genes? Yes, we can copy our genes. Your body is always copying genes.
I mean, like, can we take all the genes, like, copy
Oh.
it or remove it?
Oh yeah? Yeah, we can. We can do that. We already do that.
So I can clone myself.
You can clone yourself?
Clone.
We're not allowed to do it by law, but if you, scientists know how to clone you. Yeah. If you want to be cloned, they can clone you. Yeah. But we're not allowed to do it right now. Okay? Yeah. But copying DNA, that happens in our body all the time. If you cut yourself, right, and you need to grow new skin cells, how do you do that? Cell needs to divide. You need to make more cells, right? So it has to copy the DNA from another skin cell to make a new skin cell. Okay, so genes come in different varieties. So basically, what is a gene? What did I just say, guys? What did I just say? Sylvia, what is a gene? Gene is, go back one more slide. Right? Genes are just a section of DNA that codes for a protein. Right? Sometimes the genes can be a long section or a short section. Right? So let me just draw here real quick. I'm going to draw a long strand of DNA. Right? Right? This is a long strand of DNA. And maybe this part here is my eye color. Right? And maybe this part here will be my hair color, right? It can be different sections, different large sections, small sections, right? It all depends on the trait, right? So, basically, genes, right, are a section of DNA, and the trait that is responsible, the section of DNA that is responsible for a trait, right, it's like an address. If you say this part of the gene, right, is for eye color. Imagine you driving down a street. The street has many numbers, right? House numbers. Right? That's how we determine, right, which part of the DNA is for what trait. Imagine for the eye color has a house number on a street, right? Section 5 of the street is eye color, right? The body reads DNA in a similar way. See? That's why here on this chromosome, which has DNA, this area, for example, is responsible for the flower color, right? And this part here, right, is where the alleles are for the white flower and the purple flower, right? This location on the chromosome. And organisms can have 2 copies of this gene, right? This gene here is for flower color, but you will have 2 alleles for it. You would get one allele from dad and another from mom. That's why we have 2. We've got one from each parent. And we can get different combination of alleles, and the traits that we have are the result of these different combinations that we can get. So alleles are basically just different forms of a gene. Right? If I were to use that analogy, just like that I used earlier. Like if you imagine this DNA as a street, right? And the gene is the address, right? Then the type of building would be the allele, right? If I decide to build a brick house here, right? Or a yellow house, red house, right? That will be the type of allele, the different forms that it can take. Let's try to identify these structures here. Isabel, what do we call this thing? Alleles are on it, but what's this whole thing called? Where can we find the DNA? The DNA, this is the bigger. No. It's Do you know like sometimes we have XX and then XY? Have you heard of that? Yeah, XX and XY. That's chromosomes. Everyone say chromosome. This is a picture of a chromosome. This is also a picture of a chromosome. Okay? Here we got chromosome. Okay. Right? The DNA is found in the chromosome. So this DNA is a long molecule, right? So the DNA is basically wrapped in this chromosome. Think of it like this, okay? So if you want to find DNA, first you find a cell, then you find the nucleus, then you find the chromosomes in the nucleus, and then you unravel it, right? And stretch it out, and you have your DNA. One way to remember genotype like phenotype is, look, there's the word gene right here, right? G-E-N is like genes, right? The word phenotype, think of physical traits. Things that you can see physically, right? That's one method I use to help me remember the difference between these two. Emily, number 1. Can you read the whole sentence? Each
trait was controlled by 2
alleles. Very good. 2 alleles. Evia, can you read the sentence? Number 2. No, it's actually the same answer. One allele, very good. Each offspring received 1 allele from each parent. Right? So, for example, I have brown eyes, right? And let's say, for example, eye color is for brown eyes, I have 2 alleles, right? I got 1 from my mom and 1 from my dad, right? So that I have brown eyes. Okay. Who did I not call on? Jaren, can you read the sentence? Mendel. Louder.
That's the from observation of the predictable rate of such a
3 to 1.
3 to 1 ratio and dominate to recessive traits.
Very good. Right. The 3 to 1 ratio in dominant to recessive traits, right? And the trait that he was studying is the purple to white flowers, right? The 3 to 1 ratio in purple to white flowers, or dominant to recessive traits. Good job, guys. Yeah, it was kind of tricky. The answer for 1 and 2 was the same, right? Let's watch this video. Hopefully this video will make it a little bit more clear what genes and alleles are.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for
Today
stopping
we're going to
by.
talk about the
Today
difference
we're going to talk about the
between
difference
genes and
between genes and
Let's start with
alleles.
genes.
Let's start with genes.
Genes are sections
Genes
of
are
DNA,
sections of
which
DNA
code for a
which
specific
code for a
trait.
specific trait.
You have literally
You
thousands
have
of
literally
genes.
thousands of
You have genes
genes.
for eye color,
You have
hand
genes for eye
size,
color, hand
metabolism,
size,
cell structure,
metabolism,
and
cell
every other piece of your
structure,
body.
and every other piece of your body.
It's not as simple as
It's
one
not as
gene for
simple
one
as
trait,
one gene
but
for
most
one
basic
trait,
biology
but
classes
most basic
discuss it
biology
this way
classes
for
discuss it this way for simplicity.
Let's move on to alleles.
Right, let's move on to
Alleles
alleles.
are different
So
forms
alleles
of
are
the
different
same
forms
gene.
of the same
Think of
gene.
it as a different
Think of
flavor
it as a different
or variety.
flavor or variety.
Let's use an analogy.
Let's use an analogy.
Coca-Cola
If
were the
Coca-Cola
gene,
were the
alleles
gene,
would be
the alleles would be diet, classic, caffeine-free, vanilla, cherry, or whatever kind of Coke it
right?
is.
Using the eye
Right,
color
using
gene,
the eye color gene,
the
the alleles
green,
would be
brown,
green,
gray,
brown,
blue,
gray,
hazel.
blue,
Just the
hazel.
different options for
Just the
eye
different
color.
options for eye color.
Just remember,
Just
the
remember,
gene specifies
the gene
which
specifies which
trait,
trait,
and the allele
and
specifies
the allele
what
specifies
form the gene
what
takes.
form the gene
Let me
takes.
say that again. This
Okay,
is
let
the
me say
bottom
that
line.
again. This is the bottom line.
The gene specifies
The
which
gene
trait,
specifies which
and the
trait,
allele specifies
and the
what
allele
form the
specifies
gene
what
takes.
form the gene takes.
Right, and that's it.
Right, and that's
Check
it.
out my other genetics
Check out my
videos.
other genetics
Have any
videos, and
questions?
if you have any
Throw them in the
questions, throw them in the comments. Thanks.
Okay.
아, 네.